The snow had been falling steadily for 3 hours, transforming the small mountain town of Pine Ridge into a winter postcard. Emma Walsh stood at the window of her modest cabin, watching the flakes swirl and dance in the glow of her porch light. The weather forecast had warned of a major storm moving through the Rockies, but Emma was prepared. She'd lived in this cabin for 2 years now, ever since she'd moved to Colorado, to start fresh after losing her job and her apartment back in Denver. The cabin wasn't much, just 2 small bedrooms, a living area with a stone fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that occasionally had temperamental plumbing. But it was hers. Or at least she was renting it for far less than anything in the city would have cost. She worked at the local diner during the day and did freelance bookkeeping at night, barely making ends meet but managing to keep the lights on and food in the refrigerator. At 28, Emma had learned to be resourceful. She'd learned to stretch a dollar, to fix things herself when they broke, to find contentment in simple pleasures like a warm fire and a good book. She'd also learned to be cautious. Living alone in a remote area meant being careful about strangers, about trusting too easily. Which was why, when she heard the knock on her door at nearly 9 o'clock on this snowy evening, her first instinct was concern. Emma approached the door carefully, peering through the peephole. On her porch stood a man, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair dusted with snow. He wore a dark coat that looked expensive but was thoroughly soaked, and in his arms, wrapped in a red and white plaid blanket, was a small child, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. The child's face was pressed against the man's shoulder, and Emma could see him shivering. She opened the door partway, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" The man looked up, and Emma saw exhaustion and worry etched across his features. Snow clung to his dark stubble, and his eyes held a desperate quality that was hard to fake. "I'm so sorry to bother you," he said, his voice rough with cold. "My name is Nathan Cooper. My son and our car went off the road about half a mile back. We've been walking, trying to find help, but the storm is getting worse. I saw your light. Please, I know this is asking a lot, but could we just come inside for a few minutes? My son is freezing. I just need to warm him up and then I'll call for help." Emma hesitated, every cautionary tale she'd ever heard running through her mind. But then the little boy lifted his head slightly, and she saw his face, pale, lips tinged with blue, eyes half closed. This child was genuinely in danger. She unlatched the chain and opened the door. "Come in quickly." The man stumbled inside, snow falling from his coat onto her floor. Emma could see now that both he and the child were soaked through, their clothes crusted with ice and snow. The man's hands were shaking as he held his son. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Thank you so much." "The fireplace," Emma said, pointing to the living room where a fire was already burning. "Get close to it. I'll get blankets and dry clothes." She hurried to her bedroom, pulling out her warmest blankets and searching through her limited wardrobe for anything that might fit them. She found an old oversized sweatshirt and sweatpants that would be too small for the man, but better than nothing, and a small t-shirt that might work for the child if she tied it at the waist. When she returned to the living room, Nathan had settled on the floor near the fireplace, still cradling his son. The little boy was crying quietly now, a thin, miserable sound that broke Emma's heart. "Here," she said, kneeling beside them. "We need to get him out of those wet clothes." "What's his name?" "Oliver," Nathan said. "He's 4. He's been so brave, but I think he's hypothermic." We were in the car for over an hour before we started walking, and the heater had stopped working. "Okay," Emma said, forcing herself to stay calm and practical. "Let's get him warm. Can you help him change while I make some hot tea?" Nathan nodded, already working on removing Oliver's wet jacket and shirt. Emma went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, then searched her cupboards for something that might help. She found chamomile tea, honey, and some instant hot chocolate, the cheap kind. But it would be warm and sweet. By the time she returned with 2 mugs, tea for Nathan, hot chocolate for Oliver, the boy was wrapped in a dry blanket and wearing the oversized t-shirt, looking like a small ghost. Nathan had stripped off his wet coat and was wearing Emma's sweatshirt, which was comically small on his broad frame, ending well above his wrists. "Here," Emma said, handing Oliver the hot chocolate. "Can you hold this, sweetheart?" It'll help warm you up. Oliver took the mug with both small hands, his fingers still trembling. He took a tentative sip and then another, and Emma saw a bit of color starting to return to his cheeks. Nathan accepted the tea gratefully. "I can't thank you enough," he said. "We could have died out there if you hadn't opened your door." "Anyone would have done the same," Emma said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. She'd heard too many stories of people who wouldn't have opened their doors to strangers in the night. "Not everyone," Nathan said, meeting her eyes. "Trust me. We passed several houses before we saw your light. Some were dark, but some had lights on, and no one answered when I knocked. You're the first person who helped us." Emma felt a mixture of sadness and vindication. She understood why people were cautious. She'd been cautious herself, but still, a child was involved. "Do you have a phone?" she asked. "You said you wanted to call for help." Nathan's expression turned sheepish. "My phone died about an hour ago. I was using it for GPS when we went off the road, and I'd forgotten to charge it this morning. Do you have one I could use?" Emma handed him her cell phone, watching as he tried to dial. He frowned, checked the screen, and looked up at her with dismay. "No signal," he said. Emma's heart sank. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. It happens sometimes up here. Usually comes back in a few hours. But with a storm this bad? She trailed off, not wanting to state the obvious, that they might be without service until morning or longer. Nathan closed his eyes briefly, and Emma saw him struggling to maintain composure. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we'll figure something out." "Is there a landline?" "No," Emma admitted. "I couldn't afford to have one installed when I moved in. I've just been using my cell." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the wind howling outside. Oliver had finished his hot chocolate and was starting to look drowsy, leaning against his father. "Where were you heading?" Emma asked. "In weather like this, I mean. The news has been warning about this storm for days." Nathan sighed. "We were driving back from visiting my parents in Wyoming. I thought we could beat the storm. I checked the forecast this morning and it looked like we had a window. But the weather moved in faster than predicted, and then the road got icy. I hit a patch, the car spun, and we went into a ditch. The impact did something to the engine. I tried to start it, but nothing worked. And my phone was dying, and I knew we couldn't just sit there in a freezing car." He looked down at Oliver, who was now fighting to keep his eyes open. "I had to get him somewhere safe. That was all I could think about, just getting him somewhere warm." Emma felt her caution melting away as she watched this father with his child. Whatever else Nathan Cooper might be, he was clearly a man who loved his son desperately. "You can stay here tonight," she heard herself saying. "Both of you. It's not safe to try to go anywhere in this storm. And even if we could call for help, I doubt anyone could reach us until morning. I don't have much, it's a small place, but I have food and blankets and it's warm. You're welcome to stay." Nathan looked at her with an expression of such profound relief and gratitude that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "We're complete strangers. You don't know anything about us." "I know you're a father trying to protect his son," Emma said simply. "And I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere else to turn. You can take my bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch. Let Oliver get properly warmed up and rested." "I couldn't take your bed," Nathan protested. "You can and you will," Emma said firmly. "Oliver needs to sleep somewhere comfortable and warm." End of discussion. Nathan started to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Truly, you're remarkably kind." Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just doing what's right." "Come on, let me show you the bedroom. Then I'll make some dinner, nothing fancy, but I have soup and bread." She led them to her small bedroom, which contained a double bed with a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and not much else. She decorated it simply, with a few thrift store finds and some pressed wildflowers in frames she'd made herself. "It's not much," she said, suddenly self-conscious about her modest accommodations. "It's perfect," Nathan said, and he sounded like he meant it. He laid Oliver down on the bed, tucking the quilt around him. The little boy was already half asleep, his small face finally peaceful. They returned to the kitchen, where Emma heated up vegetable soup and sliced bread. As they ate at her small table, Nathan told her more about himself, carefully, gradually, as if testing how much to reveal. He was from Seattle originally, he said. He had business in Denver. He'd been visiting his parents in Wyoming with Oliver because his ex-wife, Oliver's mother, was traveling for work and couldn't take him. The custody arrangement was complicated, he said with a bitter edge to his voice, but he cherished the time he got with his son. What do you do for work? Emma asked, making conversation. Nathan hesitated, and Emma saw something flicker across his face. Calculation, perhaps, or worry. I'm in business, he said vaguely. Management, consulting, that sort of thing. Nothing very interesting. Emma didn't push. Everyone had a right to their privacy, and if Nathan didn't want to elaborate, that was his choice. And you? Nathan asked. What brings you to Pine Ridge? It's pretty remote. That's exactly why I came, Emma said. I needed a fresh start. I was working in corporate finance in Denver. Nothing glamorous. Just accounts payable for a manufacturing company. But they downsized, I lost my job, couldn't make rent, and suddenly I was scrambling. A friend of a friend knew about this cabin, knew the owner was looking for a long-term renter who'd keep the place up. I jumped at it. That must have been difficult, Nathan said. Starting over. It was, Emma admitted. Still is sometimes. Money's tight. I work at Sally's Diner in town during the day, waitressing, some cooking. I do bookkeeping online at night for small businesses. It's not what I thought I'd be doing at 28. But it's honest work and I can pay my bills, mostly, she added with a self-deprecating smile. Nathan studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You seem like someone who lands on her feet. More like someone who's learned to be grateful for solid ground, Emma said. They finished eating, and Emma insisted on cleaning up while Nathan checked on Oliver, who was sleeping soundly. When everything was put away, Emma made up the couch for herself with blankets and a pillow, then showed Nathan where the bathroom was and made sure he had everything he might need. I really can't thank you enough, Nathan said again as Emma prepared to settle in for the night. What you've done for us, for Oliver. I won't forget it. Anyone would have done the same, Emma repeated, though she wasn't sure she believed it any more than she had the first time. No, Nathan said firmly. They wouldn't have. But you did. That says everything about who you are. Emma didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply wished him good night and turned out the lights, leaving only the glow of the dying fire. She lay on the couch, listening to the storm rage outside and the old cabin creak and settle. She thought about the man and child sleeping in her bedroom, about the strangeness of having strangers in her home, about the leap of faith she'd taken in opening her door. She'd learned to be cautious over the past few years, to protect herself, to expect that people would let her down. But tonight she'd chosen trust instead of fear, compassion instead of self-protection, and somehow that felt right. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and something else, something sweet and buttery. Confused, she sat up on the couch, wincing at the stiffness in her back. Morning light was streaming through the windows, and the storm had passed, leaving everything outside coated in pristine white snow. She got up and followed the scent to the kitchen, where she found Nathan standing at her stove, somehow managing to cook despite the limited supplies. Oliver sat at the table, looking much better than he had the night before, coloring on some paper with crayons Emma didn't remember having. Good morning, Nathan said, turning with a smile. I hope you don't mind. I found pancake mix in your cupboard and thought I'd make breakfast as a thank you. Coffee's ready, too. Emma stared at the scene in disbelief. You made breakfast? Well, you saved our lives, Nathan said. It seemed like the least I could do. Plus, I'm actually a pretty decent cook when I have ingredients to work with. The pancakes were fluffy and golden, and Nathan had somehow managed to make a fruit compote from the frozen berries Emma kept in her freezer. It was the best breakfast she'd had in months. These are amazing, she said around a mouthful of pancake. My mother taught me, Nathan said. She said anyone who couldn't cook a decent breakfast wasn't worth knowing. She sounds wise, Emma said. After breakfast, Nathan tried Emma's phone again and found that service had been restored. He stepped outside to make some calls while Emma cleaned up the breakfast dishes. Oliver stayed with her, chattering about the snow and asking if they could build a snowman. Maybe after your dad finishes his calls, Emma said, charmed by the little boy's enthusiasm. When Nathan came back inside, his expression was troubled. I called a tow service, he said. They're completely backed up with calls from the storm, but they think they can get to my car by this afternoon. I also called the rental company. I'll need to arrange a replacement vehicle. And I called my parents to let them know we're okay." "That's good," Emma said. Nathan hesitated, then continued. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you last night, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how you'd react." Emma felt a flutter of concern. "Okay." "My full name is Nathan Cooper," he said carefully. "I'm the CEO of Cooper Digital Solutions. Maybe you've heard of it?" Emma's eyes widened. Cooper Digital Solutions was one of the largest tech companies in the country, known for innovative software that had revolutionized everything from healthcare to education. Nathan Cooper wasn't just successful. He was one of the wealthiest men in America, regularly appearing on Forbes lists and business news programs. You're that Nathan Cooper?" she said, her voice coming out higher than she intended. "I am," Nathan confirmed. "And I didn't tell you last night because, well, honestly, it was refreshing to just be a father who needed help, not a CEO or a public figure. You treated me like a person, like someone who mattered not because of my name or my money, but just because I needed help. That meant more to me than you know." Emma sank into a chair, trying to process this information. "Why tell me now?" "Because I don't want there to be dishonesty between us," Nathan said. "And because I want to help you, to thank you properly. Emma, you opened your door to strangers in a storm. You gave us your bed, your food, your trust. That's not something I can just walk away from with a simple thank you." "I don't want money," Emma said quickly. "That's not why I helped you." "I know that," Nathan said gently. "If you'd wanted money, you would have treated me differently once you knew who I was. But Emma, please, let me do something. You mentioned you lost your job, that you're working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Let me help with that. I have connections in Denver, in corporate finance. I could make some calls, set up some interviews." Emma felt torn. Part of her wanted to refuse out of pride, to insist she could manage on her own. But another part of her, the practical part that had learned the hard way that survival sometimes meant accepting help, knew this was an opportunity she'd be foolish to turn down. "I don't want charity," she said carefully. "If you can help me get interviews, real interviews where I'd be hired on merit, then yes, I'd appreciate that." "Of course on merit," Nathan said. "Though I'll be honest, any company would be lucky to have someone with your character. The skills can be taught. Integrity like yours is rare." Over the next few hours, as they waited for the tow truck, Nathan made calls. Emma heard him talking to various people, describing her background, her skills, her situation. He was careful never to make it sound like he was asking for favors, just making connections, introducing one professional to another. By the time the tow truck arrived to retrieve Nathan's rental car, Emma had 3 interview appointments, scheduled for the following week with major companies in Denver, all legitimate positions in finance departments, all with salaries far above what she was currently making. "I can't believe you did all this," Emma said as Nathan prepared to leave with Oliver, a new rental car having been delivered to Emma's cabin. "This morning I was a waitress struggling to make rent. Now I have interviews with companies I never thought would look at my resume." "You always had the potential," Nathan said. "I just opened some doors. What happens next is up to you and your abilities." Oliver hugged Emma goodbye, making her promise to build a snowman with him someday. Nathan lingered at the door, seeming reluctant to leave. "I meant what I said," he told her. "I won't forget what you did for us. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you have my number now. Use it." "I will," Emma promised. Though she couldn't quite imagine a scenario where she'd call Nathan Cooper, billionaire CEO, for help. But as she watched them drive away, disappearing down the snowy road, she felt something shift inside her. She'd taken a chance on strangers, and it had opened up possibilities she'd never imagined. Maybe, she thought, that was the real lesson. That kindness didn't just help others. It opened doors for yourself in ways you couldn't predict. The interviews Nathan had arranged went better than Emma had dared hope. All 3 companies were impressed with her credentials and experience. 2 made offers. The third, a mid-sized tech firm called Innovate Solutions, offered her a position as a senior financial analyst, with a salary that made her head spin, along with benefits, retirement matching, and a signing bonus. Emma accepted immediately. Within a month, she'd moved back to Denver into a nice apartment that